So I'll be talking to you today, a little presentation called Prep to a T. This is kind of some of my advice on the growth and development to make you guys employable. And I'll leave it's pretty short, and I'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. So the main question I want to answer is it better to be a specialist or a generalist? So obviously it's a little bit of a contrived question. It's not an either or, but I see a lot of debate about it on the internet, and I've also heard a lot of mixed opinions come out of schools and even come out of hiring managers at different studios in the game industry. So I think it's worth addressing, and I think that you'll be a little bit surprised at the advice. So let's talk about specialist versus generalist. I'm going to use a couple of animals as a metaphor. Not only because they're cute, but because I think they're a really good metaphor. So on your left, you've got the koala bear. Koala is the consummate specialist. You can tell he's a specialist because he's got that serious look in his eye. He's totally into this eucalyptus, I guess. I don't know. I think they're a little freaky personally. They kind of freak me out a little bit. But so they're highly specialized to live in eucalyptus forests. All right, they live in eucalyptus trees. They only eat eucalyptus. It's literally the only food they can eat, and they're so good at it. They're highly adapted for it. They've got these claws, so they can climb up and down the trees. They've got opposable thumbs, like a lot of primates, and that's so that they can grip these tiny little branches and kind of strip the leaves off and put them in their mouths. They've also got a really highly evolved teeth and their digestive system. Everything in their body is made just for eating eucalyptus. So highly specialized, and what this has done for them is it's let them live in an environment where there's really no natural predators. So they're up there in the trees, they're by themselves away from predators because of their specialization, and you can see that they've grown a little bit, maybe fat and comfy up there in the trees by themselves. So that's a specialist. So the generalist, let's talk about the raccoon. So raccoons are very generalized. They've developed a little bit of intelligence. They got this thick fur to keep them warm, and they can live pretty much anywhere. So they live in mountains, they live in meadows, they live in forests, swamps, and they live in cities. Like in the Seattle area, they just roam around here like gangs, like they're out gang banging. They've got they can travel in these packs in the middle of the night. It's really creepy to see a big group of them on the side of the road. But they can do that because they can eat anything, right? They can eat plants, they can eat animals, and then they could eat leftover pizza and warm beer out of my garbage can, right? So it's really working out well for them being specialists. So which one's better? If you look at my personal background, you're probably going to assume that I'm going to preach generalist, because I would say I'm probably a pretty strong generalist personally. I've done a lot of different roles. It's almost kind of ridiculous. However, there are some drawbacks. So let's look at the pros and cons of being a generalist. So the big pro is that they're very versatile, right? They can play several roles. They can do a lot of different things. And people that are generalists, they generally learn new skills quickly. Which is usually how they became a generalist in the first place. They like learning, they like picking up new things. Maybe they're a little bit distractible, so they kind of chase whatever the hot new technology is out there and try to learn it. Some drawbacks from a hiring manager perspective is that they can come off as being jack of all trades but master of none, which can be a little bit scary. Also, when you're a generalist and you're trying to find a job, it can be very hard to communicate your value proposition to the people that are interviewing you. It's hard to walk into a studio and say, "I'm kind of good at lots of stuff, so you should hire me." You really need that. It's a tough sell. All right, so that's another drawback. Specialists also have their drawbacks. What they've got going for them is they generally have very high achievement in their skill area. So these specialists are the kind of people that later in their career they start writing white papers and really pushing the technology forward. And they often get paid more, right? There's a lot of job security sometimes in being a specialist because it's a very clear value add to a team. So for instance, if you specialize in being a network engineer and you're applying at a company that needs networking engineers because they're ramping up their number of games doing network play, that's an easy sell. You can say, look, you need somebody to write your networking back end. I know how to do that. You should hire me. It's very, very clear value add. And then once you get in there, they don't want to lose you because that would bring their whole team crumbling down, and so you can often get paid more. Now, the drawbacks to being a specialist is that it's hard to get hired if your skill isn't needed, right? If you're a badass character animator, and that's kind of your specialty, you're going to have a hard time getting hired at some place that doesn't have characters to animate, right? So, like, if you want to go work at Microsoft on a Forza game, they're probably not going to hire a character animator. I don't think you need to animate those cars. From a hiring manager perspective, one of the problems that I see with specialists is that it's when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail syndrome. People that are very good at a particular skill generally they really want to use that skill to solve kind of all the problems, whether or not it's a really great solution or not. Another drawback is that skill that could become obsolete. So, early in my career, for a while, it was a really big deal to do 3D modeling using a technology called metaballs. So I don't know if you guys have ever even heard of metaballs, but they were a big deal for a couple of years for modeling. And so right now, you probably have never heard of it. It's not around anymore. So if somebody really hung their hat on their skill set as a metaball modeler, they're probably unemployed right now unless they've also adapted to some of the newer modeling techniques. And in fact, the koala bear, yeah, great at living in the eucalyptus forest, but those things are like being logged and turned into houses right now. And if the eucalyptus forests go away, then the polar bear or the koala bears are going to be in a world of hurt. Poor little guys. Okay, so right now you might be thinking, I get it. Specialists and generalists are different. They each have their pros and cons. What am I supposed to do with this information? All right. Well, don't be a specialist. Don't be a generalist. Be T-shaped. That's a bad graphic, actually. Let me pick it. Yeah, T-shaped. No, still a bad graphic. There we go. T-shaped, like the letter T. All right, this is what I'm talking about. So the letter T is a really great metaphor for how you can build out your skill set to be maximally employable in the game industry. Because it's got two axes. It's got a breadth axis and it's got a depth axis. And you need both, and you really need to pay attention to this because if you're not actively building in these directions, then you might end up not building in one of the directions. Real quickly, I'll just talk about depth. I'm talking about deep skill in a specific core discipline. Okay, so this is something that you're extremely good at. You can really hang your hat on it and build it as the foundation of your career. When you're picking this skill, you got to make sure that it's something you're passionate about and something that you can excel at, all right? So it's got to be something you're really good at and you really love doing because you're going to be doing it for a lot of years and you're really going to be spending a ton of time on it and really working hard on it. When I talk about breadth, I'm talking about sort of a broader understanding of the ecosystem as a whole. So understanding the game industry as a whole, how it works, what the history is, where it's going to. I'm talking about understanding, when you get into a studio, you're understanding the whole studio and how it fits together, understanding your whole team and how everybody works on your team, okay? So this is important because it lets you understand how you fit into the bigger picture. And it gives you the flexibility to support your team in a lot of different ways. So you start with that depth foundation and then you start building a breadth of understanding and you start picking up extra skills that sort of orbit your primary skill to help flesh that out. So an example of an animal that's T-shaped, actually, is there any guesses? Like, you guys think of a good animal that's got a good deep skill set, but also a breadth? I don't know, I can't hear anybody. I don't know if people are yelling stuff out or if everybody's like, yawn. I'm gonna just give you my, I'll just give you my answer. A bear? All right, yeah, I think that could go. I could go with bear. I can get that. Oh, my pick when I was thinking about this was this guy here. Not only because it's just a weird looking animal, but as I thought about it, it really is a pretty amazing T-shaped animal. So this is the platypus. You guys have all, back in grade school, probably learned something about a platypus. You probably learned it has a bill like a duck, and it lays eggs like a reptile, and so they're an interesting animal in a lot of different ways. But what a lot of people don't know about the platypus is that it's highly specialized to be an aquatic animal. So these guys have this waterproof fur. They've got these dorsal nostrils, so they can have their head just barely peeking up above water, and they can still breathe. And they've got webbed feet, so they can swim super fast, right, like ducks have. And this has allowed them to sort of like own the waterways in Australia. So they are found all the way from the Australian Alps, way up in the mountains, all the way down to like the rainforests of Queensland. So they're really all over the place. They're highly, highly specialized, and it's working out very well for them. Now, they're also a generalist, right? So they've got that vertical post on the T as an aquatic animal, and they've got this generalist too, right? And they've got these little adaptations they've sort of come up with to sort of help out when they're not like right in their natural habitat all the time, right? So they're pretty crappy at going up on land and walking around. They kind of have to like walk around with their knuckles. But when they are on land, they can defend themselves because they've got poisonous barbs in their feet. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, they can scratch you and it poisons you. They've got venom in their feet. Like, it's bizarre. They also are carnivores, so they can eat a huge variety of things, right? They can eat worms and shrimp and crayfish and all sorts of things like that. They've also got a weird adaptation called electrolocation. And sharks and some other animals have this, right? So they can sense the electrical field of living creatures, and so they can find food even when it's kind of hidden, like when it's buried down in the dirt or in the sand. So they're specialists in water, but they've got a lot of other stuff going for them that really helps them out when they're not in their water, right? Now, for these generalist features, they're not particularly great at them, right? So it all helps. But like, for instance, these, even though they lay eggs, they nurse their young, right? They're mammals, they nurse their young. But they don't have nipples. So it's like they just kind of like ooze milk through their skin, and they sort of hope that their little pups can kind of figure it out. So while it's a nice generalist adaptation, as far as like nursing goes, it seems kind of like nature's epic fail to me. Like, at least, you know, if you're going to nurse, at least have nipples, right? But you know, it's a nice generalist adaptation, right? So that's an example. So as a game developer, how can you develop this T-shaped skill set? Start by developing a deep specialty to build upon. All right? And I'm serious. This has got to be your specialty. You've got to be so good at this that you feel comfortable saying, I am a specialist. This is my thing. And that takes a lot of work. All right? It's very tempting, especially when you're in school. It's very tempting to want to try a little bit of everything. And that's what school is good for too, is you get exposed to a lot of different things. You can sort of find out what you like, right? Because going to school, a lot of times we don't know what we're really into. We don't know what we really want to do. So, but you have to really focus on building that specialty. Really hammer on it, really learn it. The goal is to try to be better at it than the other people that are applying to the same job as you. All right? So that should strike a little bit of fear in your heart about getting your butts in gear on that. At the same time, also learn about related functional areas, right? If you're an animator, try to learn a little bit about programming. It'll help you understand programmers better when you're working with them at a game studio, but it'll also help you because maybe you can write some little scripts in Maya to automate some stuff that's boring for you to do, right? You can make yourself more productive, or writing scripts in Photoshop or something. If you're a programmer, learn a little bit about production. Read a book on how to run a game team, right? Learn how to do some scheduling and some sprint planning. And that might help you land a job as a lead programmer someday, because leads do some scheduling work, and they sort of support along with the producer. So you can do this maybe by trying work in other roles, right? So like if you're doing team projects at school or outside of school, see if you can sort of like be the producer of the project part-time, or pick, if you're an artist, pick up a little bit of a programming task that might help you out, right? So you're developing that broader skill set. Bottom line is, building a T-shaped skill set, it'll make you more valuable and adaptable and hireable, right? That's the bottom line. You will be more hireable than the people that are competing for the same jobs if you can say, I'm a specialist in this thing, but I understand these other things as well, and I can talk about them, and I can even do them a little bit when needed.